All right. Well, this is just a little solo experiment. I'm not even sure if it's going to get published or not. So we'll just go through this and try to put my thoughts out there and then see how I feel about it after I'm done. I've been really focused on this idea of the spirit of 1989 and the liberal order recently. I've been trying to determine how to best address this subject. I plan on writing at least an essay on it, maybe a couple. I might even turn it into a book. I don't know, but I just wanted to kind of sit down and work out some of my thoughts here. So that's what we're going to do. So this might not be the most interesting listen there is, but it is just helping me kind of put things into perspective. Talking these things out, talking with people always helps. At least my thought process and the way that I go about things. So, I was reading an article the other day written by Francis Fukuyama in which he's talking about the spirit of 1989, and how was it kind of caught me off guard. I was like, what is this? What is this guy talking about? Like, why would you say that? Like, what are you trying to get at with this? So I just started doing some random Google searches and looking around, and I wasn't using Google, I was using DuckDuckGo, but we found out that they are just as bad as Google, given the current circumstances. Um, that's another story altogether. And I start, everything's like, all the articles I found were talking about the fall of the Berlin Wall and the fall of the Soviet Union. So then I kind of like, well, this sounds familiar, but why is this important? So I go back and I find an audiobook I listened to a couple of years ago called The War State by Michael Swanson. And I start listening to it. And he starts talking about the Truman Doctrine. And and so I was like, well, what is the Truman Doctrine? So I start trying to figure out what the Truman Doctrine was, and putting it into perspective for myself. Because we all heard of the Monroe Doctrine, but what is the Truman Doctrine? What is it that Truman put forth that these people are so encompassed by? This goes into kind of conspiracy territory. And I think it was necessarily planted as conspiracy territory to keep normies and the average working man, the blue collar man, in support of the military industrial complex and their expansion across the world. The global manifest destiny, if you will, uh, given I can't think of a better way of describing it, what the U.S. has become. It's and there's the New World Order conspiracy has grains of truth to it, and then there's a lot of misinformation in there. And I'm certain, as I just mentioned, that the lies were intentionally planted in order to throw people off the scent, so that the political class could act without the voting public disputing what they were doing. So if you read like H.G. Wells, he wrote an essay called The New World Order, in which he talks about future plans. If you've ever read any Cecil Rhodes, he's talked about the creating a global governance system. Um, the Rothschilds are open advocates of a global governance system. Everybody's heard the name Klaus Schwab by now, understands that he's advocating for kind of technocratic imperialism in which no one has the choice to opt out of technology. So you would have no Amish or African tribes, and he specifically targets third world countries that have resisted adopting technology. But I mean, that would absolutely include the Amish into that. So you have these people that have, over the years, Aldous Huxley, George Orwell, written about the possibility of what a global governance system would look like, and the totalitarianism it would take form, and how it would operate, and how it would completely alter and control the lives of human beings. It seems like the main component of this is transhumanism, is the collaboration of technology with the human species, in which the human not only functions as a machine, which the public education has been designed to churn out good little workers and people that act as just parts of the machine, but it's also going to make you part machine, in which they can get into your thoughts, like with like a Neuralink or something like that. And I started writing a little short story about this idea. I should probably go back and finish it. But they want to incorporate the technology with humanity, and you've seen this in like shows like Black Mirror. There was a show I tried to watch. It was really bad. It was not good. But it was called The Feed. That kind of gets into the idea of a connective, like, hive mind, where everybody's brain is connected to the internet in some way. And so these are things that are discussed and thought about, and it moves us into a direction into which, like, your mind could be hacked, like literally hacked, and all your most sensitive thoughts and feelings and information could be removed directly from your brain, and they would not have to. You wouldn't be dependent on technological advances and actual equipment like a phone or a computer, and so therefore it would be direct access to your dreams and your thoughts and your feelings and your emotions. And so you could really police thought in this function, in this way. You set up algorithms that flag specific thoughts. Just like right now we have algorithms that flag words that you put into Twitter. If you had a thought that was against the approved narrative, then you could be flagged and get a warning, like that lady in Canada did for donating to the truckers, where the police just showed up to her house and like, hey, we just wanted to let you know how real protesting actually works. And she's like, what, you're monitoring my social media? Like, what the fuck? So they wouldn't be monitoring your social media anymore. They'd be monitoring the most intimate thoughts of your mind, and it would be collected in data dumps, like the NSA does right now with social media platforms. So it would be pulled directly out of your thoughts. It wouldn't even be an action or words that you actually spoke. It would just be something that may have like come across your mind, like just in a second. So, like, for instance, when my wife first got on Twitter, Pete had posted some joke making fun of Kurt Cobain. Well, my wife's a huge Nirvana fan, and so she responded to him, and she's like, "I will murder you," just as a joke, just tongue in cheek, messing around. Everybody knows, like how people are, and how friends jack around with each other. Not 5 minutes later, she's no longer on Twitter. Her account completely suspended. She had been on for like less than a week, and immediately got flagged because she used the word murder. So the algorithm picked it up so quickly and acted in such haste that she didn't even get a chance to say, hey, wait, this was a joke. It's he's a friend of mine and we're messing around, right? So you can imagine how dangerous something like that would be, is if they were able to actually access your thoughts and your dreams, and how quickly they could act and react to the way that you think and the way that you function and how you want to move forward in life without even expressing yourself. And I think that's part of the reason I have no fear of putting my voice out there on podcasts, is because it's like, all right, like if we don't stop things like this in its tracks and bring awareness to where technology is going and what they are trying to do and how dangerous it can be for freedom, then there's no hope. And I've lived 42 years. It's not necessarily a full life, and I would like to live longer, and I would like to see my grandchildren grow up and experience that, and see all my children get married and all those good things. But if I have to stand out here in the wilderness and shout at the trees, in order to ensure that my children can experience, the greater things in life, then I'll do that. And so that's just a sacrifice that I'm willing to make, and to put a target on my back, and put my voice out there, and hopefully we still have enough freedom to where, at least for the next 40 years, where I don't have to worry about getting targeted by any government official or three-letter agency. That would be nice. That would be my hopes. I really don't want to deal with these people. So anyway, so I look at the New World Order, and I look at the way technology is moving, and I look at the ideas. So let's just talk about like what we can prove about a New World Order. Let's forget about the conspiracy quote unquote theories. All right. Like the more radical things, I don't see any point in touching on, because there's enough there that we can have these discussions in such a way that you don't have to get into, the lizard people, or the UN, policing the streets of the United States, or FEMA camps, or, like Jewish conspiracy or whatever. Like, who cares? Like, we don't have to get into all that shit, right? And a lot of this shit is nonsense. And a lot of it is why people are afraid to talk about it. And, but we have to remember, we have to understand that there was a moment there, and I think it was in 1991, where George H.W. Bush gave a speech in which he referred to the New World Order. Like, this is the beginning of a New World Order. Like, the New World Order is and so what was he talking about? Like, this brings me back to the Truman Doctrine. He was referencing a doctrine that was written under Harry Truman. And the point of the doctrine, from, let's just steel man the argument here. There was great fear of communism taking over and displacing corporations and world leaders, right? And what they had found was, after World War I and World War II, the Central Europe was completely devastated. They were just totally destroyed. Due to all the fighting, cities had been completely decimated. The economies had fallen, and they discovered that the poorer the conditions, the less economic stability that a country had, the more likely the citizens were to advocate for communism. And so in a situation like that, the democracy would not be a viable option, but they fought an entire world war to get rid of monarchy, right? So it's like, okay, monarchy is not an option, and communism isn't an option. And if we democratically elect officials in these war-torn, impoverished regions, they're going to elect communists. And we don't want to deal with the threat of global communism trying to go make its way around the world and destroy economies and starve out people and commit horrible atrocities. So what can we do here? So Harry Truman came up with this idea, and I don't know if it was actually his idea, but he's the one who signed it into law. He's the one who made it a thing, where is if we can, in order to avoid the communists taking over these Central European countries, we will dump money and arms and training and prop up these Central European countries that are just completely devastated after 2 world wars taking place right in their midst. And so there was reason to be afraid. I mean, if you look at how Hitler rose to power, and then the rise of Stalin, these countries, Germany and Russia, or the Soviet Union. I guess it started in Russia and moved into the. I don't really. I guess I would have to look more into that. I can't remember. I think the Soviet bloc started after communism, but I could be wrong about that. So you can check my history on that. I'm just kind of off the top of my head right now, and I'm not looking up notes. So please forgive me. Excuse me. So as they were looking at the rise of Hitler and the rise of Stalin, and they were saying, okay, this is what happens if these citizens are allowed to be impoverished, right? And they will go for a strong man. These dictators, these homicidal maniacs, so to speak, and they're going to, and we can't allow that, because the communism is and fascism are worse than czarists and monarchs in effect. And when we overthrew all the monarchies around the world, we did not see this as a consequence, but we know what it means if we allow these collectivist ideals to get a foothold in democratic states. So what we're going to do is we're going to actively funnel money into these nations, and we are going to pull these nations up out of poverty so that we can ensure a more democratically free existence for these people. Now, that's a steel man to the argument. Some people would say that it was, a lot more nefarious than that. And so, I mean, you take that however you want to take it. I'm just telling you what we can absolutely prove at this point in time. So this goes on, and they were in the struggle. The Cold War was a struggle between the Russian influence, the Soviet influence, the communist influence around the world, and the West, right? So the West would be, the United States, obviously, Britain, and we incorporated Germany, or at least to the Berlin Wall, into the West, France, Spain, all these European countries that we were in cahoots with, as well as like New Zealand and Australia. So you had this going on. Well, the ties of these Western nations coming together created a type of single government structure over these nations. So like you would end up with like the United Nations, the EU, NATO, Council on Foreign Relations, all these things started popping up. They started making these alliances and these treaties and these big governmental structures. And what they're looking at is they're looking in the past and they're saying, okay, so all these elites of history had this idea that if you could incorporate a single world government and you could put it out on the world stage, you could bring in and create this big tent that encompasses all the governments of the world, of every nation of the world. And all these nations meet together like a board of directors, and they get together and they make decisions, and they have all these discussions, and it would end war. That was kind of the idea after World War II. They wanted to end war. Now, in order to do this, they had to conduct wars. Now, so this is where you get these like United States proxy wars all over the Middle East, all through these European nations. You had these like Bosnia and Chechnya and all these things that were going on in the 90s and throughout the 80s. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to create a system in which they can implement democracy, spread democracy, which would be part of the Truman Doctrine. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to get rid of what you consider the evil, collectivist ideals of nations. And so you're trying to incorporate more democratic, free-loving peoples, and you're trying to change the culture through war, really, is what you're trying to do, which, obviously this has been an absolute disaster for decades. And we can look back into history and we can see the devastation, the death, and exactly what it was. Now, I'm not willing to say that it was about capitalism, which is what a lot of Marxists will say. It was about capitalism. No, I don't think it was about capitalism. I think it was about American hegemony. I think it was about because America came out of World War II as the single superpower, that everybody looked to America. All these Western nations looked to America to lead. And so they all fell in line with America, and they kind of grabbed onto America's, coattails. And so as America was leading this idea of a world order that had been written about for years by a lot of people, most of which were Anglicans, America kind of adopted this idea and kind of took it over. How it ended up in the rank and file or in the thoughts and minds, they probably just read the same books. They all knew the same people. They knew these corporatists and these globalists, and they started buying into their ideas. So you ended up getting like these Davos and Bilderberg groups and all this kind of stuff going on, and it's the same groups of people, having the same conversations, and and again, we're still manning here. I'm not going to sit here and try to turn this into something nefarious, because no matter what I think about it, I can see how the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So I can give them the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, like maybe you had the best intentions of the world, but like you've created a fucking disaster around the world for millions and millions of people, and you're choking off the freedoms in one country in order to, it's kind of like the idea of communism was to make everybody equally poor. Since you couldn't make everyone equally rich, you had to make everyone equally poor. And now we're kind of experiencing the same idea with this globalist idea, where they're attempting to make the United States equally as enslaved as everyone else, right? So instead of making everyone equally free, because that would diminish their power and their control and their hold on a world government, then you would have to make the American people equally as enslaved, is basically the idea. So in 1989, the Berlin Wall came down, and then the Soviet Union collapsed in 91. 91, 92, something like that. And you started seeing NATO expand. and they were expanding through, through the Clinton years, through the George W. Bush years. You had all these wars on terror. You had this Wesley Clark, General Wesley Clark, come out and say that they were planning on toppling all these governments: Syria, Iran, Iraq, Libya. I don't remember all of them. I think it was like 7 governments. And so you and as an American and somebody who's not like knee deep in the conspiracy theories, then you're like, what? Why are they doing this? This is insanity. Like, we can't allow them to do this, but they just kept doing it, and they kept doing it. And Congress never voted on it. They weren't wars. They were special military operations. It's a term we're hearing right now with Russia and Ukraine. And as this went on, a lot of us got more cynical towards the government and towards what they were doing and the way they were acting. But whenever I heard Fukuyama come out and say, "Oh, well, Ukraine is fighting for the spirit of 1989," I'm like, "What? Wait, what? What is he talking about? Like, you're an American citizen. Why aren't you talking about the spirit of 1776, right?" Well, because from a globalist perspective, from these elites' perspective, the defeat of communism, the falling of the Berlin Wall, the defeat of communism, and the incorporation of a peaceful Europe through American debt and funneling money in military arms, weapons, building bases, and the expansion of NATO. Like, these things have created a more peaceful world. And that the plan was to continue to expand this and to continue to grow this until you had every country under this umbrella working in congruence with each other in order to keep peace around the world. So the liberal world order, so to speak, the unipolar world order, would be one in which every country had accepted the post-Enlightenment doctrine and liberalism and began moving, in the direction of liberal democracies around the world. And in order to accomplish this, they had to militarily dominate these nations. And they had to put pressure on them. They had to utilize the CIA with color revolutions, corporatism, NGOs. You've seen all of these things occurring, and if you're looking at it like piece by piece, you're like, man, they just keep doing these stupid things. But if you look at it with that the ultimate goal is American hegemony, that the ultimate goal is to create this world order of peace and prosperity across the world, in which every nation is working together and they all operate as equals on the stage, or, equals when some are more equal than others, obviously, then you can't tolerate the governments getting out of line. You can't tolerate the citizens of a nation actually wanting a different type of governance system. Like, you can't tolerate Iraq having Saddam Hussein at the helm. You can't tolerate Gaddafi talking about buying oil for euros. You can't tolerate Vladimir Putin being a traditionalist and a Slavic nationalist, however you want to say it, in which he wants to kind of return back to the czarist kind of ideal of what Russia was, and incorporate these Slavic nations and these Baltic nations back into the Russian Empire. And which is why I was confused earlier, because I'm pretty sure that the Russian Empire prior to the Soviet Union and the Soviet Union were similar in structure as far as land mass goes. But I could be wrong about that. But anyway, So you can't accept that, because that then would have nations putting themselves ahead of others. Now, you can deal with your citizens believing that you're still a nation state, but you can't deal with the leaders of the nation acting as if they are still a nation, an independent sovereign nation state. That the sovereignty of the nation state on the global stage is gone. As far as it's concerned, everybody must work together in order to create a more peaceful, prosperous society. And you can let your little worker bees on the ground, your tax cattle, you can let them think they're still a sovereign nation. You can give them illusion through culture that they're still a sovereign nation, but you're going to incorporate this world order. And the reason they called it a world order is because empire sounded so bad. That the United States was not to be a traditional empire. They were not going to go around the world and plant their flag in the Philippines and call the Philippines United States territory. What they were going to do is they were going to go in there and they were going to structure these nations as they saw fit. That they were going to structure their governments and then control their governments through economics. And we've seen that around the world where you get sanctions and all this. And I mean, even more so now with Russia, it's terrifying to see the private corporations actually getting in line and being afraid of reputational risk because of ESG scores and all this, which would be another long conversation to have with someone. So this new world order, this liberal world order, is one in which the Western philosophy of liberalism is spread around the world. And so we've had resistance. And the West has experienced resistance. You have North Korea, you have China, you have Iraq, you have Iran, Afghanistan, many African countries, Somalia, Libya, there's Syria, Russia. And so you have these nations around the world that are resistant to falling in line. They want to keep their sovereignty. And political leaders of a more traditional, dominant culture, a more hierarchical culture, like China, like North Korea, like Russia, Iran, are going to resist giving up their sovereignty and their power in order to fall in line with a more Western cultural ideal. They want to hold on to their cultures. They want to preserve their history and their people. And they're willing to resist at every turn. And so you get this kind of defensive nature that you see China in and that you see Russia in. And as you push these Western, these cultural values down the throat of people that do not want these cultural values, you get resistance. And it creates tensions. And then you get what you see right now with Russia and Ukraine. You can bring this back to a micro level, right? If you look in the United States and you see how parents, after COVID-19, whenever they were getting involved in their kids' schooling and really trying to figure out, like, learning what their kids were learning in school, they were like, what the fuck? Like, why are you shoving this shit down my kid's throat? Why does my kindergartner need to learn about gay sex? You know, why does my first grader need to know about transgenderism? Like, what is this? You know, I've used the example many times. I remember when my 15-year-old came home and told me he was pansexual. I was like, you don't fucking know. Like, you don't know what you are. You know, like you you don't have to label yourself in these ways like at this point in time. So as parents discovered this, it was like a culture shock to them. Like, what is this? Why are you shoving this shit down my kids' throats? Well, that's kind of how Russia, is feeling at a cultural level, right? And I'm not excusing what they're doing. Obviously, I'm just trying to explain. Like at a culture level, we've heard about how the culture of the United States, the Western culture, blue jeans and, yada, 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 women driving, this, that, and the other has made an impact in different nations around the world. And they always make it sound like it's this huge accomplishment. And okay, maybe from our perspective it is. But what do we know about these cultures, right? The United States government, when they went into Afghanistan and Iraq, they couldn't even tell you the difference between a Shia and a Sunni. Like, what do they know about these cultures? How do they don't even understand these cultures, right? And a lot of people in the United States still want to live in the U.S. culture of, of freedom and liberty and agrarianism, right? You got the Amish culture, right? Like I bring them up again, but like, think about it. Like, what if we started like shoving transgenders into Amish communities? Like, how would that go over? I don't think that would go over well. So you got to think about what's going on here. Now, this has led, and I think this is very important to talk about because, all right, so in order to create these revolutions, these orange revolutions and these coups in other governments in other nations, what the United States would do is they would sanction those nations. And what they're trying to do, their stated goal of sanctions, is to make the citizens of the country so uncomfortable that they overthrow the existing regime. All right? So, but what if this comes back, right? What if this comes back to the United States? And I think that's what we're experiencing right now. And I'll touch on that. Let me get a sip of coffee. All right. So, you have this situation where Russia invades Ukraine. In the process, the United States starts putting sanctions on Russia. Now, they were hesitant to sanction the oil and the gas because these Central European countries that the Truman Doctrine was supposed to bail out and keep stable are very dependent on Russian oil and gas. But they went ahead and put these sanctions on. And this is going to really be painful because when they put these sanctions on, now what Russia did is said, okay, well, we're not exporting fertilizer anymore. We won't export wheat anymore. Now, the United States gets like 60% of its fertilizer from Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine's obviously not producing because, well, they're at war. They're being invaded. They also the United States gets a large percentage, and I can't remember the exact percentage, of wheat to feed livestock from Russia and Ukraine. Again, Ukraine's not producing, and Russia says we're not exporting it. So basically, Russia returned sanctions to the United States. Not only did the sanctions that the United States put on Russia hurt the global population as far as the amount of natural gas and oil resources being moved around the world, and so much of our global economies depend on oil and gas for energy purposes, right? How fast would people die in the winter if they didn't have heat? In Scandinavian countries, let's say, for instance. So by doing this, you're almost falling into your own trap. You're almost sanctioning yourself, right? So what Russia is dependent on is there's so much turmoil in the United States, and my next few episodes that I'll be recording are going to cover a lot of these things, and we're going to get more into detail. I'll be interviewing. I'm going to interview Shane Hazel, Daniel McAdams, and Michael Rechtenwald are the next three I have coming up. I need to schedule with Shane Hazel, but we have a great subject that we're going to be talking about. So it's going to be really good, and I always enjoy talking to Shane. He's such a great guy. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Just a little sneak peek. I'm actually going to release this here today. So I decided, I'm like, hey, this sounds pretty good. I'm doing all right here. So you got this situation where we basically sanctioned ourselves, and we put ourselves in a situation. Russia can look at the United States and see that there was basically a well-funded and well-organized color revolution that took place in the United States over the last few years while Donald Trump was in office. It's really funny how Black Lives Matter no longer matter because there's not a nationalist in office. Kind of makes you wonder. So, but yeah, we experienced our own style of color revolution with Antifa and BLM protests out in the street, destroying cities. And so they know, and I'm sure they have intelligence on the ground, just like they did back in the Cold War. And they know what the tensions are. And they know that there's a lot of people worried, a lot of scholars, a lot of academics, former intelligence officers worried about the possibility of a civil war in the United States. And so I think they are betting that they're wagering that they can destroy not only the United States, but NATO through their actions in Ukraine, because of the global devastation the sanctions on oil and gas are going to have, and their unwillingness to export fertilizer and wheat. I think they're wagering that they can outlast. I think that they are like, look, Russia is used to financial hardship. Russians are strong people, and they've gone through these financial hardships, and they survive and they exist despite them. And he's betting that the United States is too soft, in that entering this period, it is going to create more division and more strife and possibly more violence on the streets in the United States, because hungry people will revolt, and so I think the gamble is that through the U.S. sanctions on Russia, the corporate elites leaving Russia, and Russia refusing to export wheat and fertilizer, it'll put enough strain on the population of Western societies that you'll start seeing calls to get out of NATO and to not be aligned with countries that are putting these sanctions on Russia, that you'll start seeing violence in the streets and the call to overthrow governments in the West, and possible revolutions pop up, that there will be civil wars and there will be strife. And this will in turn give Russia and China that opportunity to create the multipolar world in which Russia, China, and the United States all sit at equal footing and all have equal influence around the world. And that you don't have the domination of the petrodollar and the U.S. military all around the world. And that American hegemony is a failed experiment. And I really think that's kind of what they're betting on. I think they're betting that they can survive this better than the U.S. because the U.S. is spoiled. We've been the richest nation in the world, gluttonous and greedy for a long time. There's a lot of materialism in this country that is going to have to come to an end as things get bad. They're predicting that the sanctions plus the stopping of exports from Russia is going to create a situation where there's 40% less food created for the United States. You know, if you thought the 2008 financial crisis was bad and you had to tighten your belts, a diminished food supply, devastated supply chain, these are things that are going to take years, if not decades, to recover. This is not going to happen fast. And I think people are way too comfortable. And I think Russia is gambling on the fact that United States people have no tolerance for pain. And they may be right. And so what we're witnessing is the Western world order, the spirit of 1989, has pushed the limits and has tried to shove its cultural values and ideals down the throats of countries that are not responsive. Imagine going into, like I said, a small town and trying to teach the 5-year-olds in this small town that they should all be, gay or transgender, and see how the parents are going to react. These small towns built on the backs of family values and traditional family legacy, in which you pass down your property and your businesses from generation to generation, and the pride that goes into the family. A lot of these people can trace their lineage back to the American Revolution, right? And so imagine telling these people that are extremely proud Americans, that trace their lineage all the way back to the American Revolution, that have served in the military, that have seen their sons and daughters and brothers and sisters die in foreign wars under the ideal, the auspice that they're fighting for freedom, that they're fighting for liberty. We have to fight them over there so we don't have to fight them over here. And the only ones that have to fight anybody are the people that the United States invades. And they're fighting the proxies. And we saw it with the Afghan war with Russia, where the United States funded the Mujahideen, funded and armed the Mujahideen, and how that came back to bite us in the ass. And we ended up having to fight them ourselves under the name of Al Qaeda and ISIS. And we're seeing it today with the arming and funding of the Azov Battalion, the neo-Nazi regime. And we know Atomwaffen, who's huge. They're not like a large group, but they are, I would say they were probably the most dangerous white supremacist neo-Nazi group in the United States is Atomwaffen. They're sending their guys over there into Ukraine to fight alongside the Azov Battalion. And you're going to have battle-hardened neo-Nazis coming back to the United States. If you thought these people were scary before, wait until they come in here and they start carrying out terrorist attacks on these minority communities, right? So you could see a potential, a potential series of race fighting in the future. All this shit that they've been trying to amp up and ramp up as far as the racist divide in the country and this domestic terrorism could come true. They may speak it into existence through the actions in Ukraine. So, I don't know if Russia is making a bad calculation when thinking that by putting this pressure on NATO countries is going to end up devastating to the West and the United States, its allies, and all the NATO countries, the petrodollar, especially. We hear about Saudi Arabia and talks trading oil for the yuan, however you say it. I'm not real familiar with how to say it. Sorry. And so you could be looking at a serious situation here on the ground in the United States. And so I think people really need to start taking actions. And I'm gonna end with this because I don't like to talk about these things and just be all doom and gloom without giving some kind of prescription that you can, some actions you can take on your own. I'm going to say right now, if you have any questions about things that you can do or how to get started doing some of the things I'm going to mention here, feel free to contact me. You can email me at tommysalmons.com, or you can join my Discord, which will be there will be a link in the description, and we can chat. I don't mind. I'm not like brilliant, and I don't have all the answers, but I can at least help you get started, and we can try to figure it out, amongst ourselves, because that's what we're doing. We're creating communities to where we can figure these things out and help each other out and stay in touch, right? And that's extremely important. So I'd say the first thing you need to do, buy some seeds, buy some soil, get some pots, and just start planting some stuff. Just try to teach yourself how to create some of your food. You don't have to create all of it, but create some of it, right? I don't create all my own food. I have plenty of land to do it, but I don't have the time to work all the land at this moment. So I create what I can. I do what I can. And I figured out that building in my region, building a greenhouse, well, a high tunnel, I don't even have a legit greenhouse. I don't have a heater in there or anything, or lights or anything like that. But because I live in Southeast Texas, and we don't have like serious winters down here, very rarely does it like snow or anything like that. So it's like once every like 5 to 10 years. So if I keep that greenhouse shut up during the winter and keep that cold air off of the plants, they keep growing. And I just discovered that. And I was like, oh, wow, this is awesome. I still have stuff like left over from last year that I planted like last spring or late spring, early summer last year. So I'm like, oh, this is really cool. Like, so I can grow things year round, by building these high tunnels. And that's an excellent investment. This one I built cost me $1,000. It cost me $1,000 to build it, $1,000 in material. And, I might be able to get away with doing it for less. So it is possible. If I wouldn't have built the raised beds inside of it, and if I would have just done like tables with pots on it and just done pots, it probably would have cost me less than $1,000 to build it. Probably could have gotten away with right around $600-700, right? But I did put the raised beds inside of it, so that was additional cost. So I would, definitely start learning how to just some things, something you eat a lot of. Let's say you eat a lot of broccoli, grow some broccoli. Let's say you eat a lot of salad, grow some lettuce, but make sure it's something that you utilize. Don't grow a bunch of stuff that you're not going to eat. And we're coming up the period of time right now. It's time to start planning. You can start planning here very shortly. I've already started planning. I started planting 3 weeks ago, or no, a month ago. I started planting. I got tomatoes started. I got cucumbers started. Again, I have the high tunnel, so I'm able to kind of keep the temperature in, how I want it in there and give them enough heat. But you can start stuff inside your house in small pots. And then once that last frost, once you're past the danger of another frost, you can move those plants outside, whether you put them on, if you're in an apartment, put them out on your balcony. There are plans. You can find all kinds of stuff on the internet on balcony gardens and stuff like that. If you live in a community, let's say there's empty lots or empty places, organize with some of your neighbors and start planting stuff on these on empty spaces, right? Have community gardens, and and see if y'all can't produce. I've seen people turn their front yards into gardens, and they share the vegetables with their neighbors. If you can get some chickens, get some chickens. You'll get chickens are extremely easy to take care of. They don't take a lot of attention. I go out there every couple of days and make sure they have food and water. I'll let them out and run around every now and then, probably once a week or something like that. And their food's not expensive. And, they grow pretty fast. And within 4 or 5 months, they're producing eggs. And, each chicken can produce up to 7 eggs a day. So if you get yourself like 4 or 5 chickens, trust me, you're going to have eggs, especially if you get the right kind of chicken. Like my Dominickers and my Rhode Island Reds, they lay eggs like crazy. They're always laying eggs. If you want a meat chicken, I would go with I think it's called a New Jersey Giant. Somebody was telling me about that grows really fast and is a good meat chicken. Also the Cornish hens are good meat chickens. And if you can get a rooster and some hens, then you can have a production of eggs. You can incubate the eggs, have chicks coming out, and so you'll have a steady supply of meat. Learn to fish, go fishing. Get you a fishing license, or don't, whatever you're comfortable with. But learn to fish. Go learn how to catch your own fish. Start hunting. Hunting's a good way to get some food. I know here in Texas, year round, you can hunt squirrel, you can hunt hog year round here in Texas. So, go learn how to hunt and produce your own food. Get to know local farmers. If you live in an urban area, take a 20-minute drive out to the country and find yourself a local farmer and just talk to them and see if you can't make arrangements to buy stuff. We have a guy here that raises and slaughters cows. We buy beef from this guy for $4 a pound, right? We buy it in bulk. We buy a lot at a time. We buy half a cow at a time, and it costs us about $1,000. But it's $4 a pound, as opposed to spending $10, $15 a pound at the store. And get that organ meat. That organ meat's good for you. Heart, liver, all that stuff. All that stuff's good for you. You can find recipes to make it taste good. And, I love it, personally, but, but yeah, it's super good for you. It's probably the best part of the animal is that organ meat. So I would say that if you're a mom or you're a dad and, a parent in general, and you have an issue with the way that the school systems are going, and let's say you can't take the time to run for school board. Let's say, because getting on the school boards in the public schools at this point in time is pretty important, because the way that the culture is going and what they're doing to the children on a cultural level. But let's say you don't have the time. That's fine. A lot of companies nowadays are allowing their employees to work remotely. If you can't work remotely, I'll tell you what, my wife is a virtual assistant. She works for she has several clients that she works with and for, and she works from home, and she doesn't have to leave the home. Now, we don't have any kids, but that would be an excellent opportunity for a mother who wants to be more involved with their children, to be around. And so that would give you the freedom to be able to homeschool, especially if your children are like, late elementary, junior high, or high school. You can homeschool them, kind of set them off on their day in the morning and be available to answer questions as they come around. And you could make sure that the curriculum is on par. So look at potential virtual jobs, things that you can do from home. If you want to be more involved in your children's lives, it's a really good way to be accessible, right? So, being a virtual assistant, you're a contractor or small business owner, and you can kind of set like your own schedule, the way that you do things. Yes, you're working, you have clients that you have to answer to, but at the same time, you can tell that client, hey, look, I can't do this today, or I need to take an hour. My child needs my attention. And you can do that, and you have the freedom to do that. And so, whereas you're still working and you're still depending on that income coming in, you can do it in such a way where you are available for those children and that you are interacting with them regularly and you are involved in their lives and in their education and really taking steps to move forward. And this is extremely important for people to come to terms with and figure out ways to do. And with technology where it's at, not talking about Neuralink and getting your brain hacked into, but with the technology advancements, there's a lot more opportunity to work remotely and not have to spend 2 hours a day in a car going back and forth to the office. So definitely try to find opportunities to do that and being more involved in your children's lives. And share podcasts, right? Share these podcasts with people. We're out here, we're studying, we're researching, we're doing everything we can. It's a train, Bugs. There's a train. All right, Chinook. I'm almost done. Sorry, guys. So yeah, share these podcasts with people. Financially, if you can help, man, donate. I have a Patreon. I have a Substack. You can get me money either way. I also have PayPal. I have Cash App if you prefer that. I'll accept crypto. I have an Edge wallet, so I can put crypto addresses out there if you want to send me crypto. And I'm not just talking about me. Whoever's out there doing the work. Like right now, the Libertarian Institute, we're doing a fund drive, right? Put yourself down to donate $5 a month to the Libertarian Institute. There's a lot of us there. You're getting a lot. You're putting that funding in the right place, and you're making sure that we have the finances coming in to keep our podcasters and writers, employed and able to do these things and spend the time in researching. And we don't have to be as dependent on jobs as we may. So, just whatever you need to do. I mean, I would really prefer y'all go to libertarianinstitute.org/donate, because I think you'll get more bang for your buck if you give money there than if you give it directly to me, because there it's spread around between a lot of different people. And we're ensuring that the most amount of people are able to do this work instead of like just me. So I do appreciate everybody that donates to me directly. And if you want to do both, I'm not going to argue with you. But, I would rather you start off giving off to the Libertarian Institute at the libertarianinstitute.org/donate. And then if you're able to donate to me, then I'll happily accept your money with no argument whatsoever. I won't tell you to stop. But these are the things that I think we need to do. I used to see Twitter as useless, but now I look at it and I'm like, no, this is where the information war is being fought. This is where the truth is under attack, as these social media platforms. And the truth being under attack on these social media platforms is extremely important to have people that are fighting these information battles on these social media platforms and learning how we can do it, maneuver these loopholes in order to continue to fight this information battle. So I appreciate y'all listening. I'm surprised I got an hour out of this, but I'm glad I sat down and did this, because I think I was able to verbalize what I had to say pretty well. So I'm not going to do an intro or outro here. Just RyanBunting.com. As always, LibertarianInstitute.org. And thank you, Tom Burton, for the music. I hope y'all enjoyed this. I look forward to hearing back from you. Late.